you know what a big deal it is that we're talking about race and religion together, and that you and I are both non-biased, comfortable doing it? This thing's gonna blow up. If you had have asked me, I would have identified as a Christian. I grew up in the little church and went to Sunday school and all that stuff. But it didn't mean anything, you know. It was more like, I'm an American, so I'm a Christian, like, you know. So on this journey, I found out that I had been born again, that I had been spiritually awakened, you know. So I left the job I was in and went to seminary. And that's where the subject of whitewashing a history started to peek its head to me. And I didn't even know it at the time. I'd catch little things here and there in the history books. And I'd go, huh, well, that's interesting. You know, for a good example, Athanasius. Athanasius is known as, you know, the father of the modern Trinity. I mean, at the Council of Nicaea, this 30-year-old pupil of Alexander of Alexandria, the top guy in Alexandria, which was one of the 3 biggest cities in the empire at the time, one of the 3 key homes of Christianity, he lets his 30-year-old pupil, Athanasius, a black kid, lets him lead the way, and he wins this council. And I found out he was black because of the epithets that were used against him by the other side. They called him the little black dwarf. And I said, why would they call him the little black? That's interesting. Anyway, so all this stuff goes in my head, you know. I find out that there's 11 of the early popes are Africans, you know, and I'm going, why don't we ever learn that? You know? So here's the story of where it takes off on YouTube, right? After I got done with seminary, I do have a real boots on the ground job in ministry, but I don't talk about it because, as you know, there's crazies everywhere. I don't want my life ruined by
I understand
my religious opinions, you know. So
yeah, I separate the two as well.
I separate the two, but so I make this video called "Entire Bible Explained Like a Boss in 30 Minutes," right? And it gets millions of views, right? So there's naturally thousands of comments.
Mm-hmm.
And for a period of about 2 months, I start getting blasted. And I knew who it was in part. It's a group called the Black Hebrew Israelites, which we can talk about them a little bit. I'm down with some of what they do. And I want to, if we get a chance. But they're saying, hey, man, why is every picture of every biblical character you put in this video white? And I thought, that's a really good question. I have no idea why. The easy answer is, you know, early I would just talk and then Google copyright-free images of Joseph, copyright-free images of Jesus, and I'd put the video together.
Yeah.
But the more I thought about it, I had to accept some accountability for ignorance. I grew up in a church with a white Jesus. I just did what came naturally to me. But it woke up a passion in me to start remembering all those other little things and go, wait a second, I wonder if there's something really here. So I start looking into these quote unquote conspiracy theories, and I find many of them are very true. Some of them aren't, some of them are, but it's like everything. There's a spectrum. I believe all history is true. It's a question of how many people does it affect. Some on YouTube, let's say there's videos and they say, hey, we've been lied to. George Washington was black. This guy was black. I think there's an extreme. But there's also a truth there. There probably were Native American tribes full of darker skinned people that maybe originally came from Africa.
I've seen that.
Very true. In fact, one of the books I wrote early was a biography. It's called Shipwrecked in the Land of King Tobacco, the first Washington family immigrant to America. It's about John, George's great-grandfather, who was the first Washington to come here. And I learned about how in 1620, a Dutch ship showed up on the shore near Jamestown with African slaves to sell. And everyone's up in arms, like, what the hell is this? Because at the time they had you might know this, but for your viewers, they had the headright system, which was like indentured servitude, right? It's like, hey, I'll pay your way over. You work for me for 6 years, and then I'll give you clothes and food. And then after that, I'll give you a piece of property, a rake, a hoe, whatever you need to start your own stuff, right? That was kind of the deal. Now, it was a bum deal because over time, all the rich people bought the nice tidewater land, and they'd push the indentured servants toward the outer fringes where they would be attacked by the remnants of the Powhatan Confederacy, the natives, right? But there's another truth, and that truth is assimilation and integration. So all of these are historical truths. It's a question of how many people did it affect and when, you know?
Exactly.
One of the other theories, the picture we look at of Jesus is just Cesare Borgia, right? Now, Cesare Borgia was just an illegitimate child of Pope Alexander VI, Rodrigo Borgia, right? And so I look into this one, and I find, well, no, this one isn't true, because if you look at Byzantine art from like the 600s, 700s, 800s, you see a darker skinned Jesus. So you see what I'm saying? So you find ones that are like true, no doubt. You find ones that are like, maybe, and it affected some people for sure. And you find others that are like, I don't know about that one. I'm torn on some of these things and kind of why I think they happen the way they've happened. I'm kind of going on and on. So let me let you take the lead.
Oh no, this was good.
Okay.
I'm coming through clear.
Yeah, you're coming through real clear.
I was just amazed because you're right. It's like a balance. Not everything is true, but the more layers you start to peel back, the more you see that a lot of the things that we grew up believing is really just based upon someone else's narrative.
Yes.
And my only thing with that is not just for other people. You know what I mean? Like that's not just to leave a whole group of people, not just Black people, but all people that contributed towards Christianity and history. It's not just to alter their history just to make, you know, others feel comfortable or right. Whatever it may be.
Yeah. And you know, and that's well said. The truth is the truth and should be the truth, and we should all learn the truth.
Exactly.
And for me, you know, because of what happened to me, because of my conversion, there became no doubt that God was real and that the Christian gospel did work. Cool. This is great. All right. So I'm not scared now. Here's the field of truth, and there's rocks all through it. Let's go flip them all over and see what's underneath of them. Because I'm not worried about what I might find. Oh, no, this doctrine here is bunk. Okay, then this doctrine is bunk, exactly. Right? That's just what it is. It doesn't make it not true. It means that for whatever reason, often these doctrines come about for political reasons, you know, like trying to compromise or trying to get the most people to go along with X, Y, or Z. You know, in preparing for today, I got an idea. I'm unveiling this for the very first time.
Okay.
Never have unveiled it even on my own channel. I have proof that at least one of the original 12 tribes of Israel were in fact dark-skinned Africans.
Wow.
I have proof. There's been question about it.
Oh.
And there's plenty of evidence, but here's the proof.
What's that?
Well, in Acts, we learn about Philip being told in a vision, you know, hey, you're going to find a group of Ethiopians. I want you to go and preach the gospel to them. He baptizes the eunuch of Kandake, who was the sister of the king at that time. She would become the queen of Ethiopia because they had been worshiping in Jerusalem.
Yes.
So ask yourself this question. Why is the royal entourage of Ethiopia going to Jerusalem to worship?
That's the question that I said, like, what? Because they always did.
Right. Because they were one of the tribes from the children of Israel.
That's what they did every year. That's
what they did every year. And, you know, so, and it makes more sense too in the Christian narrative. I brought this up recently, but all right, so Christianity starts with about 3,500 people in Jerusalem, and then it spreads throughout the whole Mediterranean over about 100 years. What do people think? Do they think that, you know, someone just walked up to someone and preached the gospel, and then that person said, you know what? You're right. My way of life is stupid. Our culture and language are I'm just going to follow you. No, they would take that and it would be incorporated over generations, because you'd have to learn the language and the culture and the way people did things. And that's how quote unquote heresies would come up, because the gospel might have been preached in Axum in Ethiopia. No, that's not a good example, because the Jews were already there, and like the children of David were the ruling family there. And there's still today there a group who claim to be the children of Israel, and they claim to have the Ark of the Covenant.
Oh,
and strangely, there's chapels everywhere with fake Ark of the Covenants. And I first learned about this from a dude named Graham Hancock, who was there on assignment for the Associated Press. And he kept seeing all these fellas whose job it was to guard the gate to this one church, and they all had cataracts.
With the eyes.
What's in there? The Ark of the Covenant.
It's like fire.
It's a thing of fire, right? The Ark is a thing of fire, and their eyes are all burned up, you know? And in fact, in the early 2000s, you can find this newspaper headline on Google, but in Axum, they were actually still doing the red heifer sacrifices, which is something that was strictly for the remnants of the children of Israel. And in Israel, they made them stop doing it.
I heard about that.
Yeah. So anyway, there's some proof there that clearly, yes, you know, so that's why I said when I can mess with some of what the Black Hebrew Israelites are saying, because they're telling the truth, right? Granted, like we said, it's a spectrum. It's mixed with get the hell out of here, you Edomite, you know, you're trash.
And a lot of hatred, like perpetuated. But some of the things that they say is true. I got a buddy that is one of them. But when you see the hatred, it's just another whatever. But
I can understand it. But it's the same thing as what is it? Westboro
Baptist Church. Yeah.
Go and stand out, you know, God hated your gay son or whatever. I mean, it's everywhere. It's not just, you know, it's unfortunate.
This is amazing, because my thing is, like, with all of this rich history, let's just pinpoint Axum, Ethiopia. We don't talk about that here in the West very often. Like, I've never gone to seminary, but I've listened to many well-known preachers that have, and you don't ever hear them discuss that part of church history.
I can tell you they don't know about it. In my books in seminary, I didn't learn from one Black theologian, not one. And I can name you a list of them. Now, here's where we could say, is it a conspiracy to whitewash, or is it something else? Okay, on one hand, yes, of course, the Europeans are the prominent people, so they're going to present things based on the fact that the Europeans are the prominent people. On the other side, what if, and I've thought this too, you know, Alexandria was a major Christian center, one of the top three. What if at that time, that whole region was just considered under the purview of Alexandria? So Ethiopia wasn't separated out historically because it was considered as part of the Sea of Alexandria. I don't know. So there could be, you know, the road to hell is paved with the best of intentions. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle of that, you know?
Yeah, because those lines that were drawn in Africa, they wasn't drawn by the Africans anyway.
Right, so, and especially back then. How old is Ethiopia as its modern iteration? Didn't the Italians just during World War II attack them or something?
Yeah, they did. And the late 1800s is when it started with the Italian attack.
The Boer War was the South. That was the South Africa, right, where the white gold prospectors went in and.
But in the I think it was 1935 is when Haile Selassie went before the League of Nations at the time.
Yeah.
And then it's funny how World War II is really what pulled the Italians out, because you can't, you know, fighting a major war and a minor war, you know.
Yeah.
It's money.
Yeah. When we talked on the phone and you told me about Jonathan Edwards owning slaves.
Oh yeah.
First I had ever heard of it, and my mind was blown. So naturally, I hit the books right away. Like, what?
Oh my goodness. And let me say this for everybody who's gonna watch this. I looked up to Edwards for many, many, many years, and he got some good doctrine. I'm not against Edwards, but I am against that part not being taught, because when you go to those Reformed churches and stuff, you hear, oh, the great Jonathan Edwards, the great George Whitefield. And it's like, let's talk about the whole story. Like, let's not deify these people. They were people, regular human beings with flaws. So let's just put them in their proper context. But what's your thoughts on the whole Edwards situation?
Here's where it gets interesting. On one hand, we have this term called anachronism. And for viewers that don't know, it simply means taking the views of today and projecting them on the past. It's an easy answer to say, well, of course, back then slavery is normal, so it was okay, right? That's anachronism.
A YouTuber did that to me like a few days ago, because I've been going back and forth with him on his page, and he's really justifying it based upon he was a man of his day. That's the term. But
here's the other side of it. I consulted the Dictionary of Early Christian Beliefs regarding race and equality. And if you'll allow me, I just want to read a few things from it.
Go ahead.
Because, well, I'll tell you because after. First, races of man. In truth, I perceive that God shows no partiality, but in every nation, whoever fears him and works righteousness is accepted by him. That's from the book of Acts, chapter 10. He has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on all the face of the earth, and has determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their habitation, from the book of Acts, chapter 17. There are 4 classes of men in this world: barbarians, Greeks, Jews, and Christians. That's from Aristides in about the year 125. At the same time, it teaches us not to wrong anyone belonging to another race and to bring him under the yoke, for there is no other, not to bring him under the yoke, for there is no other reason to justify such a thing than difference of race. But that is no reason at all. Clement of Alexandria, 195 AD. We admit that the same nature exists in every race and in every the same virtue. Clement of Alexandria, 195. Now, let me read a few things from Equality of Man, and then I want to get back to George Edwards. Equality of humankind. In truth, I perceive that God shows no. Some of these we read. The one from Acts. There is neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither slave nor free. There is neither male nor female, for you are all one in Christ. From Galatians chapter 3. Both slave and free must philosophize equally, whether male or female in sex. Clement of Alexandria, 195. Know that all persons are born alike, with a capacity and ability of reasoning and feeling without preference of age, sex, or class. That's from Mark Felix in about 200 AD. Are you elevated by nobility of birth? Do you praise your parents? Yet we are all born with one lot. It is only by virtue that we are distinguished. Mark Felix, about 200. My point is this: by the actual theology and justification of the earliest Christians in the first 300 years, there is absolutely no justification for slavery, period.
Wow.
And period. So it's not anachronism to look at Jonathan Edwards and say, hey, we do have a beef with you now, pal, because you were a Puritan. You were supposed to be, now let's give him this. He is a reformer, right? The reformers, their history and their writings are less than 500 years old.
Exactly.
We have a 1,500-year-old puddle before him and his theology, 1,500 years. And it's only been in the last 50 that people coming up have learned, oh, well, there's more than 66 books in the Bible. Oh, exactly. There's 100 different Christian orthodoxies around the world,
Because I've just been so kind of hurt by that situation, because it's a lot of people that I listened to over the years. I'm sure you probably heard of John Piper.
Yeah, yes.
John MacArthur, all these guys. I could go on, but John Piper did, and James White also touched on that. He touched on that, and it just seems so mean-spirited when he touched on it. It's like, man.
It's funny you say that. I think Piper tried to be compassionate.
He always does.
In his heart, he clearly knew it was wrong. But we talk about denominationalism. It was clear that he was torn between telling the truth and towing the denominational line. Exactly. Now, let me say this about James White. Some of my work is heavily influenced by him. He is what I would consider a master of presuppositional apologetics. Protestantism today has a big problem, and this is the point I was getting to with Dr. James White. He is a brilliant Calvinist theologian. He knows his church history. He knows his textual criticism. He's a brilliant man, but I've been disappointed lately because I see him leaving those things that so many of us relied on he seems very angry at the Southern Baptist Convention for adopting the social justice platform. And now he's just on Twitter all the time talking political and nationalist stuff.
So they just me seeing that he seems angry about something.
Yes. And I'm disappointed because, it's like, come on, Dr. White, before you knew this and you said this, we were above the culture of the time. The culture of the time is going to change. And ironically, I hope this term is okay to say the Black churches. May I use that term?
Yeah. That's a cool term. I like that term.
Right. So, because I know there's Black churches and white churches and no pastor. Every pastor will say, we have everybody. No, you don't. What comedian said that? I forget who it was, but he said
Chris Rock.
Right. It might have been. Yeah. No, you don't. Right. The social justice has been tied into Black theology for generations. We just never learned about it. I'll give you some names. George Lyle. He was a Reformed theologian from the mid 1700s. He developed Silver Bluff Church. He established it. Reverend Henry Highland Garnett. He was from Kent County, Maryland, and he was born a slave, and he became a Reformed preacher. He kind of preached like a Protestant nationalism kind of thing during the 1820s, which is interesting when you think about what that time period was leading up to, right? The blood shedding of the sin being paid for ultimately with the blood, right? The Civil War.
Yeah.
Reverend Alex Cromwell, he was the teacher of W.E.B. Du Bois. We never hear about him. And Cromwell was preaching social justice back in the 1800s. And he recognized astutely that, hey, it was our own African Muslims that were selling our people over there. Let's not let them get off. Let's not let them get off in this scot-free, But anyway, Richard Allen, a famous Methodist one, and my favorite, Cardinal Sarah. I don't know if you or Cardinal Sarah. He's a Catholic and he's in the College of Cardinals. And I don't know how much you know about Catholic politics, but
not a lot.
There are a lot of Catholics in Africa. Catholicism is huge in Africa. In Ethiopia, the first Christian church was established in Axum in the 330s. What's up with that? Right? Remember what we were talking about?
Yeah.
So Cardinal Sarah is in the College of Cardinals. He's very popular because he holds to the conservative view that says, nah, all this stuff is crap, right? Mm-hmm. But like Pope Francis and his crew are bringing in what's called liberation theology from South America. They had this thing called the Amazon Synod, and they're really trying to push the church and bring South America up in power. And there's a lot of people behind Cardinal Sarah who would like to see him be the next pope, the conservatives, the true, old school Catholics who don't want all the world changes,
Okay.
So anyway, he's interesting, but so, there's a lot of Black theologians that we could be studying, that we could be looking at, that say brilliant things. And I'll tell you what, I've never read one who was like, man, screw these white people. They're all holding us down, this, that, and the other, blah, 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 this and that and the third. They never say any of that. They're preaching theology, good theology.
So what's your thoughts on with the social justice issues, with the history of it and with Dr. James White, do you think there's just a disconnect why today most white churches don't relate to it? Maybe because they haven't gone through it. Like, what's your thoughts on that?
That's a great question, and I have a couple answers. I want to give the first answer as a personal story.
Okay.
And they had some statues in there. And in one of their rooms, they had a statue of Frederick Douglass and a statue of Harriet Tubman. Life-size statues made of bronze. And they're not in a glass case. They are right there in the middle of the room. So when you walk in, you are standing face to face with a full-size Frederick Douglass looking right back at you. And while this is happening, you're reading the plaque of the history of the movement of race in the country. Anybody who would have that experience, I understand completely. The disconnect is not that what the blacks are doing is wrong. It's that the whites aren't standing up to say, hey, you know what? We can fight for our justice too, while they fight for their justice. That's what America's supposed to be about.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
land of the free. Exactly. Especially if there's some form of injustice being carried out widespread. It's not about exalting one group above the other. It's about balance.
That's a good point. In this particular case, I told that story because it was an experience that opened my eyes. I grew up in the 90s. I never considered myself a racist, and I still don't. But I do consider myself having been ignorant before, because in the 90s, we grew up, it was like every TV show was like the black kid and the white kid back to back. We're going to do it together.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
There wasn't hate and stuff like that. Like, that's cool, you know, like
exactly.
This sounds sick, but it almost seems to me like the 90s, my perception was that things were improving. Now, naturally, I grew up in the lower middle class. I didn't know what was going on with the drugs being pumped into Compton and all that stuff out there. I didn't know any of that stuff at the time. I thought things were getting better. And then as sick as this sounds, I feel like after 9/11, all of a sudden there was black-white unity because now we were going to all hate Arabs.
I remember that, though. That did happen for a short period of time.
Yeah, I think like everything we talked about from the beginning, there's a spectrum. Exactly. There's the truth. And then on both sides, you have all these other narratives that have pieces of truth in them. It's almost like the truth is a bag of marbles that gets shook up and just tossed out on the map. Yeah. And then, you know.
And you got to go scrape them up.
You got to go scrape them up. Yeah.
Do you think that's uncomfortable? To some people, like that would make them uncomfortable. Like it's kind of like looking back at a flaw, you know, that doesn't want to be seen.
It is, and it was uncomfortable for me with the statues, and I cannot hide from the truth because it's in my face. Yeah. So whoever designed this idea of these life-size statues that you go stand face to face with was brilliant, because then you can't run from it. But you bring up the good point. Do you think that's uncomfortable for some? I think it's uncomfortable for everyone. I think denominations and talking about them and how the whole thing with denominations might be bunk, I think that's people initially are motivated by fear and anger. I see it in my comment section. I see it in how, you know, people will watch my videos for a while and then go, are you a Catholic?
Yeah.
Or they'll say, why do you have that cross on your wall? You know, that's an idol, right? You know, like we have to know what check boxes to put you in before we can be comfortable with you.
Mm-hmm. That's the reform movement.
Yeah. I mean, the best thing that could happen for us as a country would be to sit through discomfort and do what we're doing, have a simple conversation about it. If we talked long enough, we would find something where we had differences of perspective, and it would be okay. And we would say, all right, well, yeah, I see where you're coming from. Here's my perspective on it. And we'd move on. It wouldn't mean we were bad people or that one of us needed to be canceled. That's the problem.